started. That looks good. And here's the back. Good evening, everyone. You're all so prompt and quiet. I don't have to quiet you down. Thanks for joining us tonight for our forum with Brittany Peowe Winnipeg Wally. Artist, culture bearer, and co-curator of the Concord Museum's recent permanent installation, Chemacheg Menuke, Paddle Strong. Since the exhibition's opening with great fanfare in May, it has been a privilege to witness how profoundly Brittany's work has transformed our introductory galleries. Visitors and students are moving through our spaces more slowly, asking more questions about often unrecognized facets of Concord's history, and engaging deeply with the artistry, resilience, and continued presence of Native people. Tonight, 6 months into the installation, we are honored to welcome Brittany back to reflect on her work and its inspiration. We will view Roberto Maidi's film created for the exhibition and see images that illuminate Brittany's artistic process. If you have not yet seen the basket in person, I really encourage you to come back soon. It's a powerful presence, and it really should be experienced up close. We are grateful tonight to the Kobe Foundation and Mass Humanities for their generous support, which made the installation and the program this evening possible. The Concord Museum's mission is to connect people to Concord's multifaceted history and its continuing influence on American cultural, political, environmental, and literary life. Central to this work is a commitment to deepening public understanding of Native history and contemporary culture for all visitors, including the more than 14,000 school children who visit here every year. We extend our deepest gratitude to the many Native advisors who have guided us on this path, and especially to Brittany, whose partnership, vision, and extraordinary artistry have brought us Chemacheg Menuke Paddle Strong. So please join me in welcoming Brittany.
Good evening. How is the volume on that? Is it okay? Good, got a lot of thumbs up. All right, awesome. So wana kweyu wani, natisuis Brittany Piai Winnipeg Wally at Hasmanisko Nipmuc. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brittany Littleleaf Wally, and I am of the Place of Many Small Stones of the Freshwater people. And I am thrilled to discuss my project tonight, Chemacheg Menuke, with all of you. The seeds of this project were planted many, many years ago when I was contemplating public history. I used to actually have a past life here where I taught martial arts in town, so I was able to see a lot of the public history and how it misrepresented what I thought was a truer story about Indigenous past. It started with Pokemon Go. For those of you who are not familiar with this game, it's a virtual reality game layered on top of our actual world. And this was interesting to me because obviously it's geared towards younger folks. I guess I skew a little older on that. But the point is, there are many different spots where you can click and you can see public history just that's available out in your town. So one day I noticed this one in the middle, a Pokestop, and it was talking about Native history. This led me down a rabbit hole to learn a lot more about the local history. And truly, this was even years before I had a relationship with the Concord Museum that the idea sprouted. And I want to also make sure that we talk about this grave that's in town as well. We'll get to him a little bit later. But I put it here just to make sure that I remember that a lot of the stories I'm going to talk about tonight are interconnected and very iterative, and we might talk about something and then go back to it afterwards. So of course the project, Chemacheg Menuke, is installed right down the hallway, and there are 3 major pieces to it. Of course, the basket that I created, the film by the wonderfully talented Roberto Maidi, And the recuration of this 17th century sword made possible by the teamwork here at the museum. And of course, this is all curated with the wonderful Reed Gotchberg. Where did you go? There she is. So this is our agenda. We are going to screen the film, talk about the inside scoop of the film, have a discussion with another tribal member and basket weaver, and then do some Q&A. And before we really get into the film, again, like I was mentioning, a lot of things are iterative, and a lot of things are connected in ways that you may not expect. So just like basket, there's a lot of things that I might mention, and we might come back to it over and over again in a different way. And again, if I skip out on something and you want to know more, please feel free to ask me afterwards, or if it's not as clear, because to me, at this point, everything makes sense. It's all connected, but it may not be so clear to other people, and I totally get that. I think I should turn my microphone off when we screen the film, I think. Yeah, should I do that? Okay. All right, well, let's get into the film. Weaving is important because it allows me to express myself, but weaving is a tradition that is as old as time. I think today it's so important to remind people that it is a legitimate way to engage and to tell stories. And just like baskets, oftentimes we can think about time as a circle. So I'm trying to tell multiple stories, some from the past, some from the present, some that might happen in the future, and I'm trying to give a visual that is a kind of a touchstone for any of those stories. Of course, we have this very, very old story about the ancestors forced to paddle out to this place called Deer Island. That story is larger than life because, of course, the people that survived those conditions, you know, their indomitable spirit that allows us to live today. It also tells a story of people who paddle today. So being able to move yourself around the landscape in that way, that's a practice that's been going on for as long as Native people have been Native people. When you look at it, you can't quite tell if the paddler is going towards you or away from you, and that's intentional because each direction has a very significant meaning, and I wanted that to kind of be ambiguous. The patterns that you see around that center are more abstract, and one of them is a traditional pattern taken directly from a wood split basket. The other patterns around the paddler are the paddler's environment. So there's a pattern of waves, and then I've taken that and altered it just a little bit to be wind at the top. So we have two different elements as well. And then there is the stubble curve design, and I've used it because it is a traditional pattern, but I've also used it to interpret whale tails or maybe the tails of fish, depending on where the paddler is, if they are in the ocean, if they're in the river. And then the same pattern is up above the paddler to represent the bird wings, two little wings that you see far out in the distance. And then at the top of the basket, there's a representation of the number 58, and that's to represent the 58 people that we are trying to tell the story of. So some of the traditions and techniques that have been passed down are different types of weaving. So I do a soft form style of weaving with cordage. The style of basket weaving that I do incorporates the pattern already. So the color actually was a little out of my hands. The color is a natural pigment, and so it's from the pokeberry plant, sometimes called pokeweed. You can make a dye from this, and that's a traditional pigment that people have been using forever. with forced assimilation, there's a chance that this, just could have been erased. And so to be able to weave in a traditional way, it allows me to honor people who have protected this tradition, who have continued on no matter what they were up against. We are still here, we have been here, and we will continue to be here for as long as here exists. Okay, so that's the film. So the film took many hours to make, and I think the interview just itself was probably far over an hour, and Roberto somehow managed to get everything down to 5 minutes. I'm a bit of a talker, if you haven't already noticed, so there's a lot of things going on in the film that I'd like to share because there's more than meets the eye. And one of the big things that I want to talk about is actually this opening scene right here. So the opening scene has a lot of meaning to me, and it's for a layered reason. First of all, I love the composition of the shot because I'm there, but I am completely drowned out by all of the land and the waterway. And I think that this allows the waterway to become the protagonist of the film in a way. Also, just to be specific, the waterway is called Chicken Brook. It's a tributary of the Charles River, and we're actually in my hometown of Medway, and we're going to talk about that a lot actually tonight. And in this map, this is a modern day map. I pulled it off of the town website. You can see this area here, this red circle. If you can't make it out, it says the Great Black Swamp, so that's relevant. It will come up later as well. The bottom of Medway down here, as you can see this jagged area, this is actually the Charles. So part of the town's border is the river itself. And incorporating the river into the film was important because at least two of the core stories that I'm trying to bring forward happen on the Charles River. And when you look at the Charles River or any river really, as a connector instead of a divider, because oftentimes, just like I said, it's the divider of the town line, right? A lot of towns and, a lot of our modern day borders are affected by waterways. Instead of thinking of it as a divider, it's actually a connector. And once you start thinking that way, the history makes a lot more sense. If we were to pull out a little bit, you can see where we are in the state of Massachusetts, and you can also start to see these three towns here we're going to talk about, so Medfield, Millis, and Medway. Also, if we're looking at this shape, we're going to see a shape kind of like this soon. Just thinking about all of the land that's close by to the Charles River. I have a very long timeline of things, and there is a link to make this interactive, and we might look at it later. But this is just to show how dense history can be. And again, a lot of what I'm going to say is incorporated in this history here. But to be more specific, Medway, Millis, and Medfield, they actually used to all be one thing. And so when we start thinking about Medfield, this is really important because Medfield has a big role to play in King Philip's War. And of course, I do want to talk about the basket, but the basket brings forward stories. And like I mentioned at the reception of this installation, Native history and our shared history is still vastly misunderstood or not taught at all. So I want to make sure that we really get into the history of why I thought this was so important. So I'm going to use a lot of maps. This map is one of my favorites. It is from a book, and one of the authors is a Nipmuc person, Dr. Ray Gould. And this map shows a lot of different boundaries. The one that I'm most interested in here is this line delineating Plymouth Colony from Mass Bay Colony. So I want us to focus on Mass Bay Colony, and eventually we'll figure out why Concord, Medway, and all this history is so deeply intertwined, because it certainly is not when you look at it from the surface. So when Mass Bay Colony was, really an exciting place for colonists to go, a lot of the towns were these coastal towns, and they eventually realized, or they deemed them to be full, and they needed to encroach on the land some more. And I really want to share this cohesive timeline of land encroachment that leads up to the King Philip's War, but also to really dig in and to make people remember that this war really is the foundation for why things are the way that they are today. So in 1635, a lot of things happen. One thing that happens is the General Court grants these two giant swaths of land. And at the time, they call them Contentment and Musketaquid. So, of course, we can see what they really were. Musketaquid, we have the people of Musketaquid Gallery here. It's a nice homage to this history and the people that were here in present-day Concord. But first, we're going to talk about Contentment, or Dedham. And another thing that happens in 1635 is the old Burial Hill that's right down the street that I was just at is also established. So I think it's really interesting because, this is part of history where we know about Plymouth Colony, we know about Roanoke, we know about these basic things that are taught in history class. But I don't think I had a class ever go further than that to really think about what's the in-between. And this is certainly the in-between. So I just want to make sure that we all recognize this is happening at the same time. So there's a lot that happens in the 1650s, and I have some pictures to talk about each event, but I am going to breeze through it because it can be quite heavy, and I have a timer going. So I just want to bring out a few different things. One, a lot is happening, sometimes like those two swaths of land, on the same day or in the same year. So some of these pictures, this is the church that sits in Natick. And Natick is the first praying town. Has anyone heard of what a praying town is, aside from like the Nipmuc people in the room? Okay, so let's test our knowledge. Has anyone heard of Indian boarding schools? That's been, okay, we all, I thought so. So the way that I see it is a praying town is the ancestor of boarding schools. Praying towns were happening in the 17th century. They were a missionary creation to convert Native people to Christianity and a British or European way of life. So we obviously see how that's directly connected to an Indian boarding school that's happening 100, 200 years later. Even when we talk about it federally, Massachusetts is not listed as having any federal boarding schools. But we had plenty of these praying towns, and they become more and more and more violent as we build up. Through the 1650s, we're not quite there yet, but tension is rising to get to that moment of critical mass when King Philip's War is happening. But this is a little further back, so if we're looking here, we're still in like 1651. This is also when Medfield is incorporated. So if you remember those three towns that I had in that map before, all of those three towns were one thing, Medfield. Also later, a few years later, we have the Great Bridge mentioned in Medfield, and this is important because Nipmuc people in about 20 years are going to burn it down. And also, understood this bridge, some people say it's this bridge, named after the Death family, not for death. They think maybe this is the location of the next part of the story, but I understand it to be this Great Bridge, because when Nipmuc people saw military success in Medfield, we burned all of the bridges down. And by one of those bridges, another person of this time, James Printer, a Nipmuc man, who could not only read and write, but also set print. We'll talk a lot about him later. He leaves a note tacked to a tree, and we don't know if it's his narrative or if he's writing this down for someone, but he tacks this note to a tree, and it really is quite potent, and it brings out the point that the English have much good things, but we have our lives. So it's almost, bringing to the surface that, you're supposed to be very pious and you're supposed to be very religious, but you really love your stuff. And that's interesting to bring that point up in the middle of this war, which is about land encroachment. Also in the 1650s, we see the creation of Neshoba Plantation. This is the 6th praying town, so Natick was the first. We see them being really created rapidly. And this is important because the basket has everything to do with Neshoba. I want to make sure that we keep going. So this is zooming back into Medfield. This up here where it says Stone House is the first house. George Fairbanks builds it there. And he doesn't just build a stone house, he builds a stone palisade. Why in Medfield would someone build a stone wall, especially when they're in the military? For defense. What could possibly be on his mind that he thinks he needs defense against? Well, Nipmuc people. So it's interesting because George Fairbanks, he has a daughter, Mary. Mary marries Joseph. Joseph and Mary have Joseph Jr. And Joseph Jr. built his house in 1693. And about, I think, 330 years later, that house and that farm come back into Nipmuc possession. Isn't that something? This is what we might think the stone house to be. Some archaeology has been done on it because the stone wall was said to not exist anymore, but some people think maybe it does exist. This is another image of what the stone wall might have looked like. This is pulling from a 1913 history book on Medway. And I was also interested in the Fairbanks, so I went online and I looked them up, and they were talking about the first native people that George Fairbanks might have come across, and apparently it was me. I was there. Again, just funny that all of these stories are tied together, because this is a picture of me when I worked at the museum previously known as Plymouth Plantation, and I had no idea that they took my picture and that they slapped it on this website. Not a clue. I found this yesterday. So Stonewall didn't keep me out. So earlier when I said you want to look at this glob of land that's around the Charles River, well, this here is another way to look at that contentment, or what Dedham was going to be. And Dedham, known as like the mother of all towns. And you can see here, this here is Medfield. And that there's a dotted line around Millis, because Millis, again, we're talking about land encroachment. Millis becomes a part of this, and then Medway becomes a part of this too, an old land grant and a new land grant. So you can see within the town that I live in, it's a perfect example of land encroachment because it goes beyond the initial land that was granted in the first place. Other things that are going on in the 1650s, 1659, big year for 17th century history, that is when John Hoare moves to Concord. So John Hoare, I don't like to center him necessarily because it's about the people that were living on his property, but of course we cannot have the story without him. John Hoare, he was a lawyer. I think one time I said he was a radical guy, and I do mean that. He was really thinking differently than people around him. He built his home not far from this museum. It's now known as the Orchard House, or at least the older parts of the Orchard House. It's less than half a mile down the street. Also in 1659, we see James Printer graduate from basically like a high school, kind of like before college thing. His peers, some of them go on to actually go to school at the Harvard Indian College, which becomes the Harvard that we all know today. James goes on to become the printer's assistant there at the Indian College. And so James Printer, his name is Wowis, he's also from Hasmoneset. And he started living with an English family when he was 5. This is something that happened back then. Sometimes Native people and English people imagined why it was happening for very different reasons. But like I said, he was not only able to be bilingual, but he was literally setting print. He was setting the type. So has anyone seen what an old printing machine looked like? You have to put every letter, a space bar was this metal thing, you set it in, every single letter, and he did this. And the first thing that he did was he printed the Bible, the first Bible ever in the Americas. And that was in 1661. And 2 years later, he would print the Bible again in full in Algonquin. And he goes on to print many different things. And like I said, it's all iterative. We will get back to him later. So we're getting back to the film. That was all about Medway and Medfield and colonialism, and again, we can get back into it later, but I want to keep going. So earlier on in the film, right in the beginning, it's the first time that we hear anything that is a non-English word. It's a great segue coming from James Printer into talking about the language. And so this happened because I got a rough cut of the film from Roberto Maiti, the patient Roberto Maiti. And I realized that there were some parts where he had music, and it would be really an opportunity missed to not put more Indigenous culture into the film, because that was really what I was trying to do with every part of this project. So I thought, oh, that's right, we can put a song in there. And so what you hear is the paddle song, and this is Larry Spotted Crow Man, and he's the one who made the song. But with the tight time crunch and the logistics, I realized if I want native music in the film, I'm gonna have to make it myself. So that is how we get some more native culture imbibed into the film. And the paddle song, or Chemacheg Menuke Paddle Strong, I had heard it from Larry before, but it stuck with me when I attended a language class. And one of our teachers is here tonight. Hi, Nia. And it was really fun because it was kind of like a special guest. It was used as a learning tool. And that's why it stuck with me so much. And I realized I can use that to open the reception. That way everyone in the room who might be uncomfortable using Algonquin language will hear it so many times that they'll be able to say it too. So Chemacheg Menuke, or Paddle Strong, is something that you hear over and over again in a call and response song, which I think is really, really great. So this is a picture of the reception. And I just wanted to make sure we talked a little bit about how that music got in there in the first place. And also behind the scenes, the setting behind me for the interview actually says a lot about me as an artist. So over here is another woven basket, and this went out to another cousin of mine. This here is a wood splint basket. I actually found that in a local antique store. And it is a painted basket, which is the hallmark of a basket made by Native people in this area. So that was quite the find. A woven belt that I've made, and parts 2 and 1 of the Different Footprints series, which the paddle basket is the 4th iteration of. This is a jar of pokeberry dye. It's quite dark, but when you hold it up in the light, you can see the vibrant fuchsia color. And also, there's a lot of plants in this room, and they have almost nothing to do with the baskets, but almost everything to do with how we think about time. So one big important thing to remember is to remember the past 7 generations and the future 7 generations, and to think longer than your own lifetime. So all the plants in this room are the descendants of my mom's plants that she had when she was in college. So it's kind of like, yeah, right? I'm very proud to have kept them alive. They do really well on negligence. So, yeah. And last but not least, a little shout out to my weaving teacher. That copper necklace there was a gift from her to me, and I wore it in the film specifically just to kind of give her a little shout out and let her know I'm thinking of her, and I really don't take this gift lightly at all. When I was talking about the different patterns that you see in the basket, what you don't hear is the different phone calls that I made to various community members when I was trying to make sure that this project made sense for us in the first place. So one person that I called up, her name is Kristen Wyman, and her family stewards a ceremony around Deer Island. And I wanted to ask her what she thought of this project. And we get back, we get into the weeds of things, and she's telling me about the importance of the paddlers surrounding at this point. And she's mentioning things like the animals, celestial bodies, the water, and all of that. And that was great to hear, because that's what, it really aligned with my vision for the basket in the first place. So it makes me feel good to at least think that I honored our conversation. And although it can be difficult to get exactly what you want in a certain amount of space and with a certain style, I really think that we were able to bring forward the things that she thought were important. And also, of course, really making sure that we memorialize these 58 people with the dots at the top. Oh, okay. Well, we'll get there. I just need to go make sure that I'm on time here. So, oh, that's right. So one thing that I also wanted to talk about is the pokeberry dye. And we'll talk about how actually making it later, but I want to talk about foraging for it. That's what this is next. So I have a big giant pokeberry plant that grows in my backyard. every year. And when my dad was alive, he would cut it down. So I think that made the plant more resilient because it grows huge, and it is sometimes known as a weed. There's definitely a discussion over when and if and who eats the very, very young leaves of this plant, but you should not be eating the berries. You should not be eating berries of a pokeberry plant. It's not good for you. It makes it great for an ingredient into a dye bath. So the plant in my yard wasn't ready to forage, to harvest. It was telling me, like, no, Brittany, like, you can't be lazy about this. Like, go get lost, get on the road, and go somewhere. And so I ended up on this journey of harvesting the pokeberry. And I called it suburban foraging because in the maps you can see Medway is not exactly an urban area, but it's not rural, and it's certainly not how it once was either. So these are some kind of images that I put some humor into. This plant here was actually ripped out of the ground the next time I went by it by construction workers. So I said, please, no, can I please have it? And they're like, don't eat it. I'm like, no, I'm gonna use it for dye. And now I think they must have thought I was gonna die because I also went to Holliston, but I couldn't forage there. Field closed. But these towns are important to me because the places that I did go became a part of the project. Maybe not a piece that you see, it's not a loud part of the project, but to me, it's definitely a part of the project nonetheless. So here's a spot where I foraged pokeberry. You can actually see that church that I mentioned in the background here in Natick. So I went to Natick to honor this place, to honor the people that are from Natick, and to honor what happened there. And so this is a pokeberry plant. Some of the berries were a bit too green, but some were just right, and I collected pokeberry from there. I also went right down the street to the orchard house, and I was able to source pokeberries from 2 different places. Right behind it, this is a pokeberry plant right here, so you can see I'm on the side of the road that has the orchard house on it. I also foraged over here. Now, it's not part of the orchard house's property today, but like we were talking about earlier, John Hoare, I don't know how the layout was of his property, but this was a part of it. And I'm not entirely sure where, but as far as an archaeological survey goes, this is around the area where we think the foundation was, where the building was, where these 58 people were on his property. They weren't living in his house with him. He was still an Englishman after all, so I think, live over there, but still very different from the people of his time. I thought it was really meaningful to be able to collect pokeberries from this side of the road. I can't remember where exactly the plant was, but it was over there, I promise you. And this is a video that my fiance took of me foraging for pokeberry, and I kept it in here for a few reasons. 1, because suburban foraging is very interesting, and 2, this place, one of my favorite places to forage for pokeberries, was also destroyed by construction, and now it's all invasive plants, so there's not a single pokeberry plant there anymore. So this is where that is on the side of the road. So it might be for the best for my own safety that the plants are no longer there, but it was still sad for me nonetheless. Another part about the dye bath and where I went to source things was Deer Island itself. I wanted to go out there and see if there was any pokeberry. There was not, but there was a lot of staghorn sumac. And I think that this was the first time I really saw this tree. I've seen this tree year after year after year, but I don't know what was going on with my plant detection. It was not happening. So I think that this was the first time I really saw, acknowledged, and began a relationship with this tree. And it might have also helped that I went out in the summer versus in the fall when I'm usually on Deer Island. But what's interesting about why would I have seen this tree so many times? It's because this tree is directly behind the memorial bench to Nipmuc people. So it was just a really interesting way to rediscover this tree. And the empty bench is fine, but we were just there the other day, and I think that speaks more for what I see when I look at that bench. All right, so I do want to move forward to the next section of the talk. But before I do, like I mentioned, Carrie Helm from Mashpee is a dear friend of mine and my weaving teacher, but also my journey, I've been helped by a lot of others as well. A few of those people are the talented Julia Martin from Aquinnah, Shirley Hyrock she's the eel clan mother of Mashpee, and the very patient Marlene Lopez, the rabbit clan mother of Mashpee. So to be helped by these esteemed aunties is nothing that I take lightly. And there are many other weavers out there, or people rather, I should say, who have upheld the tradition of this weaving. Even if they haven't taught me directly, undoubtedly they have influenced me and other contemporary weavers. So I want to make sure that I mention them, and I want to also mention that I hope that I always do right by them. And a few years ago, my Sonks chief, Cheryl Tony Hawley, she stated in front of people that I was the only Nipmuc basket weaver at that time, despite our tribe being famous for our baskets in the past. So that didn't sit right with me. It's not a good thing to be the only one, especially when it's a cultural gift. So I'm glad to say that I am no longer the only Nipmuc basket weaver. And tonight we're going to be joined by another. Her name is Anna Stedler. She's right here. Anna not only is a Nipmuc basket weaver, she also serves the Nipmuc Cultural Council, the Hasmonesko Nipmuc Health and Wellness Committee, and she works in quality management systems for a suture manufacturer, which is important. We'll see why. And that's because she has been able to incorporate these two worlds together. So welcome, Anna. I think we're going to get up on the stage now and talk. Yeah, let's go do it.
Cool.
I promised I wouldn't trip. I might trip. Don't laugh, guys.
Hey, I'm in heels too. I might also trip. You going here? I'm going there?
Go ahead. Yeah, because I already sipped from that water.
Oh my God, I'm gonna spill that water.
Okay. Hi, Anna.
Hi.
So I know we're going to talk about storytelling and artistic process. I have some notes, but I'm ready for however you've crafted your questions for me. And I do have a few slides that might help me talk about some of the answers.
All right. So I guess something that I want to talk about is like the basket weaving process and getting into like the materials. So like I guess from a starting perspective, like the cordage, how is that? How do you make that?
Yeah, that's a question that I think we also have from the museum. So the question is about making the cordage. Now, the cordage that I used in the project right down the hall is actually, it is commercial cord, but it is hemp cord, so it's a plant fiber, and it's not stretchy at all. Traditionally, things like milkweed, false nettle, dogbane, this all would have been spun into cordage, and there's many baskets that are made out of all kinds of materials. If you don't mind, I can go through a few different things to get to a picture of some soft form baskets. And particularly this one, the Narragansett basket, is made of all kinds of materials. So while I haven't spun my own cordage yet, I do have a little milkweed patch on my house. And once I defeat the aphids, we will start trying to spin it.
All right. And then I guess once we've determined the type of cordage, going into the actual like dyeing, weaving process, how do you go about that in the most efficient way?
I don't know. I don't know. So there's, I think, two parts in this question. One is about the design. So actually, a lot of my time in projects goes into the planning. And I like to say it's secret math. My mom is a retired math teacher, and she didn't give me all of those genes, or maybe I just didn't want them. And so I started weaving baskets and realized, oh, it's true what they say. Math isn't everything you'll do. It's true. So I spend a lot of time plotting out the patterns like you see in the notebook, in the film. And then, like I mentioned in the film, the pattern is incorporated already, and I know you know this. I know Nia knows this. When you're making the pattern, you don't paint it on afterwards. The way that you're manipulating the cord, it makes the pattern. And one way that I think of it, especially if it's a basket that only has 2 colors, is you can kind of think of it like hex code. It's either on or off. Depending on how many times you do a 0 or a 1, that's going to eventually make up your shape. And I can't remember exactly one, but it reminds me, and I didn't even think about talking about this, but there is an intersection between traditional weaving and computer coding. So that's a fun fact, right? As far as making the die, that's this here. So the pokeberry die was the second die that is a natural die that I've attempted to make, and the first one being black walnut. The pokeberry die is difficult with plant cordage. Like I mentioned, it was a hemp cordage, all plant, and pokeberry dyes animal fibers much more efficiently. It sticks to it so much easier. So I did a lot of trial and error to get the vibrant color and to get it to stick. I made a mini basket, wove it, ran it under the water, and all the dye washed out. And so that's why the basket is curated in the way that it is, in a very special case, because it is still water soluble and it is sensitive to the light. And in a way, it makes it ephemeral, and I'm not upset about that. I do hope that it stays, but also, we'll see. I'm in this with you. But like I mentioned, all the places that I went to collect the pokeberry. When you make a dye bath, you need a few different things. You need a mordant to get it to stick to the fiber. And this, like I said, is very slippery. It was a very volatile dye. It didn't want to stick. So I was trying to rack my brain, figuring out how can I get it to stick. I know the black walnuts have a lot of tannins, and that makes it stick. This pokeberry is not doing that. And then I realized staghorn sumac has tannins, and it's the right color. And I didn't know what was going to happen once I put it into the boiling witch cauldron. I call it that because the smell of vinegar and pokeberry, we don't like that. As humans, I think we don't like that. But I wasn't sure what would happen, but I think it did help. So that's why we also see the staghorn sumac in the dye bath. So these are just some images, and also some trial and error. You can see this over here was dye that went too hot, because if you get too cold, it won't stick as well. You go too hot, it's going to change colors. It's really volatile, so I don't know the most efficient way, but I do know a way that works.
Hey, I might be able to help with that a little bit. We dye sutures, so I might be able to take some techniques. We'll see. But I guess the next thing that I want to ask you is, when you were learning how to weave, I know, like, when you were teaching me, my initial thoughts were, my brain likes this. Certain kinds of like thread work and yarn work all are similar to each other in the way that you think about it. So I was wondering, when you were learning, what you thought.
So I've always enjoyed creating things and making crafts and creating art and expressing myself. So I like that. And oftentimes I think really deeply on things, and I never have enough time to share all my thoughts. But the time that I invest into a basket, it kind of makes up for that missed conversation. So I enjoy the meticulous nature of it, because I can give a piece of myself to others. And in doing that, I mean, it's changed my life. We're here today because of that. So that's one thing that I like about basket weaving. Another slide that I have that I didn't think would work for this, but I'm excited to share if I can find it. Let's see, where did it go? We will get to that slide before we do Q&A. This one, sorry, I must have passed it a million times. That question also brings me to weaving then and now. So, like I've mentioned over and over again, this style of weaving is soft form. And in fact, I brought this to share, because the basket is behind glass, but it's not something that can't be engaged with. So we can actually pass this around. We can give it, yeah. So soft form basket weaving, it does not last well in the dirt. It doesn't last well. You don't see it a lot in the archaeological record, but we know that we've been weaving like this since time immemorial for many different reasons. Not only can you just trust the oral history, but you can see it from objects deep in the past, even without the woven piece. So what you see here are two different pottery sherds, and sometimes, well, all the time they would be decorated, but sometimes people would take something that was woven and press it into the unfired clay, then fire it, and now you have this beautiful imprint on your, whatever, your clay pot. And if we're lucky enough, we can see the footprints of that from the past. And I love this. This one, it looks like an open twined bag versus a closed twine that we're all looking at. You can see every single stitch. So for me to be learning how to weave, but also just like the act of weaving, sometimes it feels a bit mindless because we're not doing it the way that our ancestors would have, which would have been like in community. Me and the TV and like my, streaming services is not necessarily how one might want to weave in a more community kind of way, is what I'm saying. But just sitting there and doing the motions, knowing that this is exactly how people did this all throughout history, I don't think there's anything more powerful than that when you're considering how to honor your ancestors and how to be, how to commune with them. So that's what I think about when I'm doing the act of the actual weaving.
So you had mentioned footprints in here.
I did.
Would you mind talking about the other baskets in your series?
Yes. So Different Footprints is a series of baskets that I have been working on for quite some time. So I'm just going to back up. This is part 1, part 2, and part 3, and I brought them all with me. They haven't been together with their youngest sibling for quite some time. And the Different Footprints series, all of them have something visual that's similar, which is just being fully covered in patterns. I kind of came out of a phase of doing, and not that I don't anymore, but having one huge kind of pictorial thing in the middle of the basket and maybe like a little detail on the top and bottom. And I started realizing I really need to hone my skill. I want to do more. So I want to make something, and every single row has to be something. And all these different patterns, when you put them together, it's really powerful. And so it's to kind of be a metaphor for when different people, whether they're from different tribes or from different walks of life, when you're doing something together, it can be very beautiful, it can be very powerful. That is what the Different Footprints series is about, leaving these different prints and then looking back and seeing what we've done together. The colors are very much a part of the series. So we have red, blue, yellow. That is also a natural dye. And of course, the magenta, or the fuchsia rather, from the 4th basket. Before we get to the colors, I guess we could just breeze through and also know that all of the patterns have some kind of historical reference, and sometimes a modern thing as well. So that's why I put these here, just to kind of give people an idea of both ends of the spectrum, the modern and historic. So these are the different colors that we're working with. So I'm working off of an additive color theory of light. And so I have to do green and cyan and white to finish the series. And there's a few different things that this invokes for me. I always try to honor my ancestors and the community and to do things in a good way when it comes to weaving. And that also includes honoring my dad, who is no longer with us today physically, and he was colorblind. And he was colorblind like every single way. So you really wouldn't know it unless you wore a really beautiful purple dress and you called it blue. But other than that, you really wouldn't know. And I just, thinking about how we receive color and light and thinking about how he made his way in the world, that really influences a lot of the art and the way that I express myself today. And then a fun thing, I don't know, I think everyone in this room might recognize this. I don't know if you know what that is. That is a 1980s projector TV, and I grew up in a house with one of them. And when I was little, I would like to put my hands in front of the lights and kind of play with them. And this light, if you see, is red, green, and blue, just like the additive color theory of light. So just with those 3 simple lights, you can make all the scenes from every TV show and every movie, as long as it's like dim enough in the room. So that's a little bit of a fun fact about me and the kind of little fun fact about different footprints as well.
All right. And so for the the most recent installment in that different footprints, how do you think like the paddling, could you talk about how that ties in as like a metaphor?
Yeah. So at a certain point, paddling becomes a metaphor for presence. And what I want this basket to be, like I've been saying, is a touchstone for many different stories. And a lot of them are, yes, they're about history, but they're also about Native presence as well. So when I say, paddle strong, it's also thinking about, be strong, be proud of who you are, engage with that. The Native people, a lot of times you can say that you were the most seen and unseen at the same time. And this can relate from something to Native mascots all the way to Native tribes who the members might be right now having issues accessing food because of what's going on in the government. We're the most seen and unseen population. So to really talk about Native presence and to try and bring that forth in every single part of the project, that is when paddle strong, the word paddle, becomes a metaphor for presence. Yeah. I know that we're almost at the end. Thank you for keeping me on track. There's one thing that I want to share that I don't know if anyone will really ask about, and it's another part of the project that I insist we all know about. And it's this clause in the artistic agreement with the museum. So one thing about museums is that they are not always seen in the best of light by Native people. And I think everyone at the Concord Museum knows that. And that is because museums, especially with the collection culture of the 18 and 1900s, this was very bad for Native people. Our culture, our creations, our ancestors taken from us and displaced further and further and further away. So I really want to take institutions to task in order to correct that. The Concord Museum is one that is doing that. One big thing that people can think about is making sure that you follow NAGPRA. So with this basket, it's a modern day creation. So it's not, from ancestors far deep in the past. It's me, I'm here, I'm still alive. And the future, hopefully everything will be great with the Concord Museum, but for some reason something should change. I wanted to make sure that this creation would go back to us because we are someone's seventh generation from the past, but one day will be that ancestor. And I wouldn't want someone to be in the same position that I am in, where a lot of our material culture and more has been displaced, not because of us, but because of institutional decisions. Maybe something from our culture gets, accessioned into a place and they change what they're doing. And so they sell off their stuff to another place or another place. And sometimes our things end up across the country. Why? And now I can't access them to learn about myself. So I do want to celebrate the Concord Museum and always trying to do right. And I think that no institution is perfect, but that the goal isn't to be perfect. It's to know that you're going to hit a speed bump and think, okay, what are we going to do once we fix the flat tire? What are we going to do once we hit the speed bump? Because there's always going to be something. So how do we recover and how do we continue moving at the speed of trust once the something happens? And so I'm glad to think that this is a place that I feel safe as a Native person to share our stories and to be able to have agency over our own stories. And at the same time, also in the deep future, should anything happen, I have control over where the basket goes. It's not up to the institution's whim. The institution understands that this history is important and maybe, I don't know if it will be, but maybe this basket will be important in the future as well. So. Thank you. I think we have 5 minutes for Q&A, and I have a lot more slides to refer to if you want. I guess we can just go in order from this way to that way. Okay. Hi.
Did it take you to make that basket?
Oh, that's a great question. So the question, for especially for those of us virtual, how long did it take me to make the basket? Another question I don't know the answer to, but I can tell you this. The basket is, it's a bushel, like a small laundry basket. And depending on where I was in the pattern, going around once would take anywhere from half an hour to an hour. So one time around. I started the basket actually a handful of years ago, so I never really like fully clocked the whole amount of time. But I would put laps in, or track them in my timer, and yeah, that's about the average, half an hour to an hour every time I went around.
You count the layers and figure it out.
Like a tree. No.
Also gathering and dyeing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yes.
What is that made of, that basket? The one that you passed around? What is the
Oh,
material?
that one is also hemp cordage. It's just older. It's a little bit softer, and it's seen a lot more, like not necessarily use, but it's older, I guess, than the one that's in the
I
case.
just have a request. You went through those photos so fast.
I know.
Can you just do that more slowly?
Yeah.
please?
Which ones would you like
The
to
ones with the
see?
different baskets and
Ah,
different
yes.
patterns.
So those are my references and historical inspiration for different baskets within this series.
That's the super speedy way.
Yeah, so
if you
this
could
one is
just-
part one, and this has some strawberry vines, and you can see them very faint at the top. There's also geometrics like the square in the middle and that in the blue box. And then it has an Easter egg at the top, which is a sample of a pattern from a 17th century soft form bag that was, I think it was created around Warwick, Rhode Island, making it Narragansett. So this basket still exists. It's in another slide. Those are the big three. And moving on, its twin, this basket here. I'm pulling from some Nipmuc baskets that have an 8-pointed star. We love an 8-pointed star, and you can see that across many different cultures. If there's any quilt enthusiasts in here, you see 8-pointed stars on quilts a lot, but you also see it painted on our baskets. And then, of course, the bars are the hash marks. This is really interesting. In my, I guess, study of basketry, I've read that this could even be a pattern of a basket on a basket. So now it's on a basket, on a basket, on a basket. And at the top of this basket is a reference to another one of the surviving 17th century bags. This one is a Mohegan basket. It's woven so fine, my weaving teacher said it might as well have been woven out of dental floss, which I would want to celebrate Anna with, because she weaves out of suture material, and the material, what about this one that you're still working on?
This
It's
one?
so thin. I don't know why she's
It's
chosen
tiny.
to do that. It's really great work. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit about that bag. This yellow one is based off of how I realized what was going on with this big basket here, because sometimes the paint will fade. So this looked like this, or this, where we kind of look like paddles almost. And you keep staring at the big basket and you realize paint has faded. It's actually a trail. You can kind of see it here. And so this makes a lot more sense, because trails are often painted onto our baskets. We don't usually see paddles. It's just not right for the area. So one side is what it looked like, and the other side is the remembering of what it once was. And then there's two other things. I've only kept one because it's about history. The other one is a modern thing. But this is the aerial view of the Mystic Massacre, the Pequot Massacre, in 1637. I also have that on my very complex timeline. What's interesting is that in 1636, Mass Bay Colony goes all the way down to Connecticut to make war with Pequot people. So this is a very complex story. It's a very sad story. And I knew that this basket was going to be in Mystic. So this red basket was going to be shown first in Providence, so I wanted to include a Rhode Island-based pattern. This yellow basket in Mystic, it's a place where my parents would go, and they would bring me when I was younger too, a lot of memories there. So this is a lot about nostalgia and memory. And I actually came to see this in real life, thanks to Nipmuc curator Kim Toney, this image is at the John Hay Library at Brown University. So I got to see it in person. I've only seen pictures of it, and I couldn't believe that I was seeing it in person. I didn't know it was there. And so I wanted to make sure that I incorporated it so you see this very highly stylized, the circles, the palisade, the circular palisades on either side. And as far as the next one, you'll just have to go down the hallway to see it. But yeah, that's a little bit more about those specific baskets. Yeah, thank you. I'm looking at the time. It's 8 o'clock. I don't know. It's really up to Allison if I can.
How did you create the yellow dye for this?
Yeah, the yellow dye is a combination of turmeric and marigolds that I had growing in one of my flower pots. Yeah, which certainly dyes your countertops, unlike the pokeberry dye, washes right away. Yep. If I could make the one slide that I'd love to kind of leave open-ended for folks is this crazy kind of dramatic thing. And it's because here at the Concord Museum, I know it's so important to tell local stories. And sometimes our modern dividers with our towns can make it really difficult for us to understand everything is connected. And the lives that we live today are truly affected by something that was 350 years ago. I know a lot of us are thinking about the 250th, so this is my invitation to go a little bit further back and to realize that we are not just a product of the revolution, we are a product of King Philip's War. What we live in our reality today is coming from something that is so vastly undertaught or misunderstood, and I get that it's hard to understand. But there's enough research, I brought all the books, there's enough research out there where it doesn't have to be that difficult. There are people who can pull out all kinds of fun facts about the Revolution, about World War II, and I say, what about King Philip's War? And there's no idea. But it is so very much our shared history. And so over here you see these people that are all intertwined. Green is like a positive kind of relationship, and red is something violent. That was something that was not good. I'm happy to talk about this at any time, really, just call me up. And like I mentioned that grave earlier in the very beginning, and like I mentioned the 3 parts of the exhibit, it's the basket, it is the film, but it is also recurating the sword and thinking about Native people and museums and our relationship. So the sword we changed, it was kind of in the middle of the room almost, and I'm a bit of a short person, so it felt very eye to eye. It was very uncomfortable for me because it was a 17th century militia sword. Very easily could have been used in King Philip's War around here. And when I was interning here, I walked down the street and I was looking at the old burial hill, and I was looking for John Hoare's grave. I wanted to, just pay him some respects in a way, because he was the one who was letting these 58 Nipmuc people live on his property to try and avoid them having to go out to Deer Island. And I stumbled upon Timothy Wheeler's grave instead, and it was marked with an American flag, even though he died in before the flag existed in any way possible. But he was a veteran. This made me question, what is this doing here? And I looked at what war he could have possibly fought in. It was King Philip's War. And his brother, Thomas Wheeler, is the Wheeler of Wheeler's Surprise when Nipmuc people burnt down Brookfield. We reclaimed that land. So I was there, I was in the old graveyard, I'm looking down, and it was a really interesting feeling. And I thought, this is probably the feeling we should invoke with that militia sword, because you don't want that sword looming behind you while you're looking at the basket. And that was received really well by the museum, and I'm very grateful for that. Some of these people I mentioned, some of them I haven't yet, but this is a good example of how our history is deeply intertwined, and Native history is very relevant to everyone's history. So I truly encourage everyone to learn more about it, but also to make connections with living Native people too. I'm very grateful to be able to talk about some of my favorite interests with everyone, so thank you so much, and thank you, Concord Museum. I don't know what happens now. I'm just gonna stay here, I guess.
So it's 3:50.